So here's a question. In a football game, what's the point of a huddle, right? Right before the play begins, right before the football is snapped. Why would the team have a huddle? That was actually the question we started this past Sunday's adult forum in our series Worship Wise asking. And I know usually we think of football being after Sunday church, but the question I think is an important one. If you know anything about how football works, right? Obviously, you're there to watch the game itself. The huddle is just that moment when the team all gathers together and calls what the next play is going to be, right? The quarterback will say, here's what we're going to run. That reminds all the other players, here's what we're supposed to do. They know where they're supposed to be. And then the actual game goes, right? Nobody joins a football team because they can't wait to huddle, and nobody watches a football game because of the exciting huddles. The huddle is that sort of recentering moment so that then they break and then can go line up and the game actually continues, right? The point of the football game is the actual play on the field. The huddle is what makes that possible. Well, it reminds them, here's what we're going to do next. I mention this because a really important question for us to ask about what we think the Christian life is, why we gather for worship, has to do with how you understand the huddle. And what I mean by that is sometimes, I think in pop religion, we treat Sunday morning gatherings as that's the sum total of what Christians do. What does it mean to be a Christian? You show up on Sunday morning, you sing songs, you listen to a sermon, that's it, and then the rest of your life sort of goes on as normal. As though the thing we're supposed to do is an hour of church on Sunday and the rest of our lives are left unchanged. But I want to suggest maybe Sunday morning is like the huddle. Sunday morning, when we gather for worship, is that recentering, reminding us who we are and how we live in the world in light of God's good news after having been fed at the table with God's gifts in the bread and the cup of Christ's own presence, so that then we leave and we, line up on the line of scrimmage. We live out our lives Sunday through Saturday, actually living out this faith of ours. That's what helps make sense of that fourth movement of our Sunday pattern of worship. We talked before about how there's sort of a fourfold structure to Christian liturgy that goes way, way, way back, even to the earliest centuries. First, we're gathered. Then there's a time around the word, right? We hear from the scriptures. We're fed at the table, the meal of Jesus, what we call Holy Communion or the Lord's Supper, and then sending. And when we're sent into the world, it's not just sort of, we've run out of stuff to do, it's the end of the concert, and now it's time to go home. We are not just audience members at a performance here to be entertained. We're on the team, we're on the field, and this is the huddle to remind us who we are so that when we break, we know how to face the world around us. We live out our faith there. There's some important things that often happen in that final part of our worship service, even though it feels just like the coda, like the tail end of things. One is that often we'll have prayers of blessing of Holy Communion for those who are going to be going to visit the homebound, people who are stuck at home either to sickness or weather, or they're in the hospital, or they're recovering at a rehab facility, something like that. But there's this moment where after we've in the room of all celebrated communion, there's this blessing of those who are going to carry communion and extend the table out to others. Maybe in a similar way to when you gather with your extended family for Thanksgiving dinner and somebody in the family couldn't make it because they got to work on Thanksgiving Day. Their job is such that they've got to work the dinner shift on Thanksgiving Day. You don't say, well, sorry, you don't get to eat because you couldn't make it. You make a care package, right? Well, let's send leftovers. Let's send food to them so that they know they're included. They had to work at the hospital, but we're making sure they don't miss out, that kind of thing. In a similar way, when we gather on Sundays, there's this reminder we aren't the only ones at the table. We aren't the only ones included. And so when we prepare blessing for the communion for those who are going to be going out into the world to visit folks from our church family, that's a way of saying they're included too, extending the table that way. And it does have a way of reminding us that those of us who are in the room on a Sunday morning aren't the only people who belong to Christ. Not only is it other folks who are homebound or homesick, but for that matter, it's the church down the road, it's the church around the world, it's the congregations throughout history. We're part of something much bigger than just the people who came on any given Sunday morning. And then there's this other moment that's really important to talk about when we receive a spoken blessing. Sometimes they are really, really ancient words, like the words that are sometimes called the Aaronic benediction, that go, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord's face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you with favor and give you peace. Those words go back thousands of years. They're found actually early on in the Bible, in the Torah, and the first books of the Bible, as a blessing given for Aaron, the brother of Moses, to bless those who will continue on in his line in the priestly work of ancient Israel. So those are ancient words that in some way we stand in continuity with. Sometimes there are other words of blessing as well, because the words themselves aren't magic, right? That's another important theme we've talked about. How the words we use in worship are important, but not in the sense that they're magical, not in the sense of if I don't use these exact words, Jesus won't show up, or God won't be here, or it won't count. It's not like that. We're not performing magic spells here. But the words that are used to bless us, whether they are ancient or new, are what I like to think of as a hand on the door moment. When you're about to head out for the day, right? You're just about to leave for work, or your kids are about to leave for school. Often that'll be that moment for somebody in the house to say, remember I love you, or have a good day, or I'm thinking of you. It's one of those moments that sends you out reminding you you're not alone, reminding you who you are, remembering who you belong to, and remembering that you don't face life alone no matter what you're headed out to. In a similar way, as we go with the blessing of God spoken to us, it reminds us that God doesn't stay in the building and that we're leaving and that God is being left behind, but that God goes with us. There's no place we can go in our lives where God isn't. And that moment of blessing reminds us that. And then as we follow out, walking outward, following behind the cross, right? It's one more way of remembering that Christ goes with us and that our lives are always about following this crucified and risen Jesus out into the world. That Jesus doesn't stay put, but he's loose in the world as well. And so our lives are spent following Jesus. It's not just we should stay in the church building forever, but Jesus gathers us and then sends us out into the world. So that even those last words that are called the dismissal, sometimes it's go in peace, serve the Lord, and we all say thanks be to God, or some other variation, is a reminder that we're sent with a mission. The word dismissal sometimes feels kind of pedestrian, kind of say, things are done, you're out you go. But the word dismissal is related to the same word missio that means sending, that means we're sent with a purpose, with a mission. It's related to the same word for mission. If we think of every Sunday as ending with a mission, how do we live out our faith in the week ahead? How can we be witnesses to the God we've just worshiped? How can we point other people to the God who we've met here in the Word and at the meal of Jesus and in the waters of baptism? That's the calling. How do we invite other people to share that? How do we become witnesses to that as well? Maybe you've heard the old line attributed to D.T. Niles, that evangelism is just one beggar telling another beggar where to find bread, right? That's maybe what we're sent out to do, to be witnesses who point and say, we found something good in this Jesus, and we point to other people to come and get to know this Jesus as well. So those are the four major movements of our Sunday liturgy: gathering, word, meal, sending. This coming Sunday, we're going to continue taking a look at the church year and what it does, why we have it, where it came from. And then in our final session in another 2 weeks, we'll be taking a look at those other moments in our shared worship life together, occasional services, weddings and funerals, and what happens there. What do we think those are really all about? So join us on Sunday mornings for our series Worship Wise. Bring your questions, bring your thoughts, and catch up with these video sessions along the way. See you then.